Hi, everyone, and welcome to the office hours for OMS-CS 6300. As you may be able to tell, I am not Alex. He is not here at the moment. He is running a little bit late with child issues or something. He will be here, but he asked Aaron and me to get it started, and he will join in shortly. So we are here. Aaron, say hello.
Hello. I gave Panda a chair so she can be a third person.
Oh, okay. Panda, can you answer some of these questions? Squeak. So do we have any updates for people?
Yeah, okay. As you probably saw, the A3 grades are uploaded. The A4 grades, unfortunately, are not uploaded. I was hoping to do that today, but that should be done by Saturday. But since all of the major outstanding issues are resolved, we have posted the grading tests for A4. So if you're curious before then, you can run the tests and get a pretty good idea of the grade yourself. A3 also has our instructor tests uploaded in a pin post. So if you see comments in your grade that say you failed instructor tests or you failed the solution test and some test names, those aren't your tests. Those are the tests in the pin post. Run that, and it should pretty much show you exactly what happened. The A5 we've started looking at. I think we've said before that is one of the hardest ones to grade. Everything is so individual on that, and basically we're looking at 400 drawings. So that I would expect to be about 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Like
all right.
From now, not
2 weeks from now. Yes. So we hope to have that done about the time, in time for us to be ready for these projects that you're working on now, which are also going to be a bear to grade. So we want to make sure our decks are cleared by the time that comes through.
Yeah, they're on D2.
Yep.
So 2 weeks would put them doing D4 and would still have us done before we start grading their projects.
Right. So that's where we should be, hopefully, if all goes well. I think that's everything we have. I'm sure Alex will have more for you when he gets here. But for now, we're going to get started on the questions, which means I have to put on my old man glasses so I can read them. All right. So the first question is, there's some confusion about the meaning of activity. Does this mean Android activity? C818. Update, there was a response to 818, but we're still unsure what's being asked for. Answer is not Android activity. It means higher level activities per link above. Good questions for Prof to clarify.
Does this seem like a familiar question, Will?
Does. You want?
Yeah, I actually have tried to add further clarifying words to this almost every term we've done this. I'm beginning to hate the word activity. It has absolutely nothing to do with Android activities. Forget about the whole Android thing until you're actually working on implementation. Like, it really doesn't matter yet. This is all about the project development process, which is both in the lectures and is almost spelled out for you in how you're having to do the deliverables. Please don't write that you're doing like 6 iterations of the full project development process in 4 weeks of deliverables, because you're probably not. Look at what we've asked you to do for D0 through D4. Look at the different software development processes, the cycles in the lectures. See how they line up. They should line up pretty well. And that should give you a lot about what are the input and output from each of those steps. As well as, we've asked for deliverables on each step, which should also be a pretty good start on the output from those steps.
Yep. All right. So the next question is, do we need a logout button in order for users to log out of the app without closing it?
It sounds nice, but we didn't ask for it. You don't have to do things we didn't ask for, but you can always put them in extra requirements if they help you. It might make testing a little bit easier.
However, I will say that we also don't, there's always somebody when we say that says, oh, can I get extra credit for it if I do? No, you can add extra things if you want to add extra things, but they're not going to be extra credit, and you're not going to, if you do something extra, but then you don't get around to doing something you should have done from the requirements, we're not going to trade for it and say, well, since you gave us that, we'll give you the points. That you have to do the things we asked you to do. Anything extra you put in there because it's easier for you for testing or whatever, you're welcome to do, but we're not going to, there's not extra credit for it. So
yeah, I would also say this is a little early to worry about extra things in your implementation. I always see people who want to start on implementation details this as of this early, and it does not go well because you will end up skipping some of the project development steps, some of the documentation steps, or treating those as being a lot less because you're worried about the implementation. And you really need to do the whole process for this project. We do grade the documents.
Yep. All right, next question. Do we need to include a forgot username feature? Again, did we ask for it? I don't believe we did, which means...
Also seems difficult with the amount of information that's associated with the username.
Right. So no, it's not in the requirements. And if you can think of a way to do it and you're sitting around going, hey, I got nothing to do tonight, let me do this. You're welcome to, but it's not in the requirements, so you're not required to do it.
I think we actually said that we don't even care if they're entering their username. Like, they can enter it or they can pull it down from a list.
Yep.
Which, that would make it hard to forget.
Yep. Next question. I'm assuming we are free to choose restrictions on number and type of characters allowed for username. Please confirm.
To a degree.
Yeah, I wouldn't go too restrictive because, if we have tests and stuff that we're going to run against things and you've said, okay, I'm going to make sure all usernames can only be 3 characters long, and our tests fail because of it, that's going to cause a problem. If you have the option to choose between, I want to cap it at 20 characters or want to cap it at 100 characters, whatever, that's fine. But I wouldn't go. There's no real benefit to being too restrictive. I would think.
Right. I mean, if you're just worried about, hey, I want something that fits in a reasonable table column, you're probably not going to have problems.
Right.
If you're looking to make it some super specific formula to make them easily generated or something weird, and that might get a little too restrictive.
Yep. Next question. Please provide an example of a pre and post condition in a use case.
Oh, I was thinking about this one when I saw it earlier. So, the library example that he has in the lectures, if you're checking out a book, in his example, the precondition would be that you've requested it, so the book is available and you've picked the format of the book and everything, and that you have a user account registered and you're eligible to check out a book and the right age and stuff. And then the post condition would be that they have the book and they have a due date set for it.
And you have the book.
Yeah. Didn't I say that first?
No, you said they have the book. You didn't say you have the book.
Yeah,
which okay. I just wanted to clarify that, they being the library, they don't have the book anymore. You have the book. They no longer do.
Fuzzy pronouns.
Exactly. I'm just making sure it's clear because, we have enough problems with people not understanding what we're saying. And if we catch something, we should correct it or make sure it's clear. All right. Next question. Under the use case model, should each use case have all of the following elements in the description? Requirements, preconditions, post-conditions, and scenarios. There can be cases where a use case might not have a pre or post condition. So can we skip that?
No, seriously, don't skip that.
Do not.
I have a very hard time imagining a use case without a pre or post condition, because you can do things like precondition, you have the device with an app and the app is on.
And anytime you do something, there's a post condition. You wouldn't do something if it didn't actually change anything.
Right.
Even if you just had a button that you could press and it would give you some feedback, then the post condition would be, I got the feedback. But anytime you do something, you've done something, and the post condition is, what did you do? What is this? What does it look like? What has occurred? What has been accomplished?
It's what state do you need to be in before this use case applies? What state should you be in after this use case is done?
Exactly.
And that's never nothing.
Yep. All right. Do we get penalized if we fast forward lessons in Udacity? I run at 1.5 speed a lot, so this is a good question. No, we don't pay attention to how fast you watch them. You have to do the quizzes, and we get a sense of how many of the lectures you have watched, generally by if you've done the quizzes and stuff like that. But if you can get, and of course, if you watch it at high speed and you miss anything and then do poorly on an assignment because you missed something, and there are some assignments coming up where if you didn't fully internalize the information in the lectures, you're going to have some trouble with the assignment. And even this one, to some extent, some of the questions we've had here relate back to things that were in the lectures. But if you can get all the information out of the lectures, watching it at 1.5 times speed or 2 times speed, that's fine. If you're not getting it all, you're ultimately risking doing more poorly or having more trouble on assignments, and you're shortchanging yourself, because we're all here to get the degree and to learn this stuff. And if you want to shortchange yourself on that, that's you're only really hurting yourself. But we're not going to actively penalize you because you are watching at a higher speed.
Actually, I think last term Alex was asking people what speed they were watching the office hours on, because people were like, I can watch it faster. Then you sound funny.
Yeah, I'm sure you and I sound really funny for those that are watching it at 1.5 or 2 times speed. Next question. In the design document requirements, it is mentioned that user interface design for GUI-based systems, this section should provide specific format layout of the user interface of the system, e.g. in the form of graphical mockups. Since we are building a mobile app, are we supposed to provide mockups for all of the screens? And if we do, in the next phase, when we actually start building the app, can it look different than the mockups we provide?
Yeah.
Yes, you should provide mockups.
Yeah.
That's step number 1. Step number 2, can it look different? Remember what we said earlier about the grading, and how as long as you make a good faith effort at each step, we will end up grading the content of at the end. And so as long as you made a good faith effort, if you then end up coding something and it looks significantly different, change your mockups for the later version. And then it won't be an issue, because the mockups, I'm not saying you have to post in the last version, post screenshots of your app, but if you did hand-drawn, every so often people will post scanned hand-drawn mockups of what it should look like. And if you did that, and then you decide to change what it's going to look like, do new hand drawings of approximately what it's now going to look like. You should be basically mocking what you're intending to build. So the odds that it'll be greatly different than what you sketched out is minimal. But if you suddenly find out that something doesn't work at all well the way you had sketched it out and you want to change it, update your doc. That's what the updates are for. Do you disagree?
No, seriously, I think the key to a good grade in the project is to really actually try and do the process. I think a lot of times it feels like you can shortcut half of the things, but it doesn't go well. You end up skipping things that we actually grade.
Yep. Yeah.
So if you try to do the mockups and you try to use them, they're not a contract, you're not stuck to them, and you'll probably do fine.
But if you don't do the mockups, you will lose points for them, because that's a required thing that should be in there. And if we don't see them, when we scan through it at the end of this deliverable, or whatever deliverable they're supposed to be in, then you'll get a 0 for them, even if you later added them, because again, that's that good faith effort to do each piece when you're there. The content is graded later as long as you had a good faith effort at everything that should have been at each deliverable. How many times am I going to say that?
It does mean not just like something for each deliverable. It means every
right.
every deliverable thing for that deliverable.
Right. That's what I mean by a good faith effort. If we stopped at that point and didn't do the rest of the phases, and we graded you on it, if we would find that there was a significant amount of stuff that was missing, then you will get a commensurate grade for that phase of the. I mean, you don't get a separate grade, but in the grading, the number of points that end up being associated with that section, you will lose a lot of points on. So, a good faith effort doesn't mean it's got to be the final version. They are living documents, as a phrase that somebody used here, and they can change over time. But you have to have made an attempt to do the deliverable as though it was an assignment in its own right, and not turn in something with placeholders and go, okay, well, I half-assed this, but I can fix it later. Because if we detect that you half-assed something, that's the kind of grade you're going to get on that section. All right, next question. In the Deliverable 2 design document, section 2.1 asks for a component diagram. Is this component diagram supposed to be a proper UML diagram, component symbols, funny linked line symbol, etc.?
I mean, that's the sort of diagram it is, but we're very, very open on the component diagram.
Yep.
Because as it says, if you don't think there's a lot of components, there might not even really be one.
Generally speaking, we look to have one. Depending on the project, and I mean, the project, we differ the project semester to semester. It's a little bit different, in some semesters that component diagram is going to be something more than on others, but it's you ought to be able to put something together for a component diagram, even if you think, even if you think that there's just one component, just draw a box with that component. If you can think of two components, draw two boxes with those components and a proper link between them. As long as you've, again, made a good faith effort, it's not going to be a real complicated thing. You shouldn't spend hours and hours on it, but you should have one.
Yeah, we're not expecting a whole mountain of components. If you're digging and scraping really hard to find other components, like you don't need to look that hard for extra components.
Right. Next question. How will this project be graded? Skewed more towards documentation, code design, app development, and functionality? How will the app we develop be tested? Will there be, all right, well, let's take these one at a time. How will the project be graded? It's roughly equal between the deliverables. I mean, there are some that end up being a little higher and a little bit lower, but it's roughly 25% for each of the deliverables, maybe as low as 20 for some, as high as 30 for others, but roughly equivalent. What?
Yeah, I think 1 and 3 are a little bit lower, and 2 and 4 have a little bit more.
I think that has traditionally been the case, but since we have not done the rubric this semester, yeah. I can't swear it'll be that way this time. But yeah, traditionally it seems like we get a little bit more content, a little bit more that we're looking for in 2 and 4, so they get a few more points, and 1 and 3 get a few less. But I mean, there are none that are gimmies. There's not, it's not like, oh well, week 2 we really only have like 3 points in there, so you need to work. No, nothing like that. They're all relatively, somewhere in the 20 to 30% of the grade range.
Well, D0 is 5 points.
Well, D0 is 5 points. That's individual. That's not for your whole team. So if half of you did it and half you didn't, half of you will get those 5 points and half of you won't. But for the rest of it, between 20 and 30 points for each of the sections. Now, how will the app we develop be tested? Aaron?
Okay, it says, will there be standard test cases that the instructor team uses, or will the app be tested using our own test cases? If the app is tested using instructor tests, will those tests include many edge corner cases and functionality outside the scope of the requirement doc?
So we'll give you, somebody's going to run your app, right? One of the graders is going to run your app, and there will be some things that we want to see it do. So for instance, if we were asking you to write a calculator app, We would want to test to make sure that addition works correctly and subtraction works correctly and multiplication and division. We probably would not hit you with things like, what happens if I multiply two numbers that are close to max int together and see if it blows up? But we might check to see that you properly handled divide by 0 to make sure that you properly issued an error message rather than having the whole app die. So, I mean, we're not going to go out of our way to find edge cases, but reasonable cases like that, yes. I mean, if your app crashes when doing something that it really shouldn't crash, you'll probably lose some points for that.
Yeah, our tests for this tend to be manual. We usually give the graders like a list of specific things to look for. But they pretty much have to be manual because we don't give you the massively detailed specifications that we would have to make an automated test that ran on everybody's app.
Right. And if we did that, then we'd be writing it for you. I mean, part of, the point of this is for you to design and develop your app, not for you to design and develop an app that we've already more or less designed and developed for you. So the result of that is that our grading has to be a lot more manual. So we can't write tests to run on your stuff because we don't know what your stuff is going to look like. So it's manual mostly.
Right. I mean, it would at least be designed to the point where they'd all look the same.
Right.
I would think of the sort of edge cases we test as being like reasonable user acceptance level test. Not like we are pen testing your app sort of thing.
Right, exactly. So testing to see whether I don't remember what this one is this time.
Flashcards, kind of.
Flashcards, okay.
It's a vocab quiz.
I was thinking it was a salary calculator, but that was not too terribly long ago.
No, I wrote this while I was trying to take the CSSLP.
Okay. Well, if you were doing a salary calculator, for instance, you wouldn't have to worry about us testing to see, well, what happens if you put in a salary that's higher than any human being has ever earned? We're not going to go out and say, well, let's see if they can handle somebody earning $150 billion a year. That kind of edge case we're not going to test. But again, reasonable things that a person might do, like accidentally hitting equals on a calculator before actually entering any numbers, making sure that behaves gracefully and doesn't suddenly crash because it doesn't know what to do. Those sorts of things you can probably expect us to test. Next question. For remove quiz, can a student remove more than one quiz at a time?
Well, we don't really say a lot about how the UI is handling that. So if that makes sense in your UI, you can. But again, we didn't require that.
Yeah. Do we need to provide an explanation in this session or just proceed to 3.1 with the class diagram? 3, low-level design. Describe how the low-level design for each system component identified in the previous section. For each component, you should provide details in the following UML diagrams to show its internal structure. The same goes for
the header sections.
Yeah.
Those are just header sections.
Okay. This one's long. All right. Hi. 2 questions re testplan.md. 1, approximately how long should each subsection in section 1 be? And we'll get to the other one after you answer that one.
I think you should read the next one while I go open the template.
All right. Could you elaborate on section 1.3 adequacy criterion? I cannot speak today. Adequacy criterion. Are you looking for metrics or type of adequacy criterion, black box versus white box versus etc.? Or to turn this whole document around, what is the instructor TA's motivation for asking this question? What concepts, insight are you hoping to see from students?
Motivation. That's okay.
I'm leaving that one to you.
This template opens so slow.
Yep. You want to go on to another question and come back to this one while you wait for it to open?
It's our Google Drive is trying to open it in like horrible apps.
Yes.
Now I can see it.
Okay.
Subsection in section 1. Oh, okay. Section 1 is everything except for the test cases. Most of those are just questions that you need to fully answer. I mean, please don't put like one word answers, but we're not looking for an essay. You know, a few reasonable sentences probably answer most of these. Just make sure you've answered all of the parts that are listed for each section. I don't think we've seen a lot of significant problems with the links in these.
Right.
In section 1.3 is the adequacy criterion. We don't usually judge that to the level we would expect later in the class when you've actually gone through the testing lectures. But you probably have somebody in your group that can draw on a little bit of testing background. This is mostly saying what makes you think that you have enough tests. You know, you can use rather colloquial terms if you want to explain that. You don't necessarily need to use, you know, percentage test coverage or any super specific things like that that you might pick up later. Let's see. You can also, since the follow-up in there mentions that they haven't implemented code yet, you might add to this later when you add the code. I think most of you are probably familiar with at least a basic concept of black box versus white box testing. You know, at this point, you're writing about your test criteria based on the requirements and the design and your project plans. Later, when you implement it, you might very well go, hey, I should add some automated tests, and you don't have to add automated tests, but you can. Or I should test this section that I've written no test cases for because it wasn't clear I needed that. Clearly, you're not going to have all of those specifics in right now. Build in the test criteria and the test cases that you know you need already. There should be a fair amount that you know you need.
All right. Next question. Low-level design, question mark. Hi, guys. I wanted a little more info on what should be in a low-level design. Would showing the classes that comprehend a module be enough to make it a low-level design? Should we go deeper and show attributes and methods? Are activities and widgets in the UI supposed to be in the components design or in the low-level design?
I should open all of the templates before these. Yeah, the low-level design is just the header that's above the class diagram and other diagrams. So for this one, you're mostly talking about the class diagram in this case. In other systems, you might have more of a low-level design. But I'm not sure what you're drawing separate, where you're talking about modules or talking about going deeper to show attributes and methods, because hopefully your class diagram does have attributes and methods.
Yep.
And we've had a lot of discussions about the class diagram so far.
All righty. Next one. My teammate Brian rewrote my question much better than I could have. When viewing a student statistic, must all quizzes appear in a single list, first taken quizzes sorted by date, then all other quizzes? Or can we split the viewing of quizzes into 3 separate lists on the same screen, with the top list being taken quizzes sorted by date, the second list showing non-taken quizzes, and the third showing quizzes this student made?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't ask for that. And we specified the sorting of a single list.
Yeah, but basically those 3 lists stuffed together would be the sorting we asked for, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. Does that seem like the same thing to you?
It doesn't. I don't. I'd have to reopen the thing, but my recollection is that it was asking for a single list, but sorted that way. I mean, I suppose separating them out into 3 lists probably wouldn't be a problem.
You are getting a live version of what would happen if you did this.
Yeah, we and the TAs, or whichever TA is grading yours, would be going back and forth and trying to decide.
And we would have this same conversation offline.
Yep, but we wouldn't look quite so silly in front of lots of people doing it. I'm gonna leave this one unresolved, and I'm gonna go and reread the specification, and then I will come back and I will type an answer to this when we're done, because I don't want to sit here and just be sitting on screen reading through the thing trying to puzzle through it, and I don't want to give you an answer and then later determine that it's not what was in the requirements. So
to give him a little bit of something to talk to, we'll make a final call on this specific thing and answer it after.
Yeah.
But basically, I mean, if you're adding things or making improvements, we're not going to have a problem. When you start altering the requirements we asked for, then we start having to make judgment calls on whether you did the requirements and did extra, or whether you just did something different. So this is really kind of about where that line is. Like, it sounds kind of potentially nicer to me, but if it's skipping anything in the requirements, that's the debate we'd have to have. So,
right. So we will have that debate.
That's what's going on.
So we'll open that up and we will have that debate, and we will write an answer here in the unless Alex shows up, in which case we'll punt it to him and let him answer. But
and he will probably make an on-the-fly call, and then we'll go with whatever that is.
Right, exactly. Even if it turns out not to be right.
Oh, that's a little harsh.
I'm sorry.
We're still on the camera.
I know, but it's a joke. Next question. If we look at the original requirement, number 6B, it reads, after every word in the quiz has been used, implying the completion of the quiz, and this information will be saved in the quiz score statistics for that quiz and student. Keeping stats on the quiz score is fine. Does that mean that we also need to keep stats on the number of quiz results for a student? So something like this below. Student 1, 2, 3, quizzes taken. Quiz 1, score 5 out of 5. Quiz 2, score 9 out of 12. Score 3, quiz 3, 1 out of 7. Average 62%.
This conversation also sounds familiar.
It does. It sounds like one we had.
Yeah. And we were mostly talking about that, and I believe your interpretation of that was it says to save all the quiz results. It doesn't actually say you have to display the other ones in any way other than the top 3 and the highest and the first. So save them in case you need them later. If you want to do anything else with them, it's extra.
But I would suggest that you probably do not need to save the how many out of how many. I mean, there was nothing in there that said you had to keep track of which ones they got right and wrong. So you don't have to hold on to that. And you probably don't need to save 5 out of 5 and 100%, because among other things that violates normal form, although this isn't a database class. But I mean, if you just save the fact that they got 100%, then you can look at the quiz and say, oh, this quiz had 5 questions, so 100% means they got 5 right. Or 75% means they got 9 right out of 12, if there's 12 questions. So you ought to be able to store one or the other, either store the number of questions they got right or the percentage, and you can get the other one by calculating back. But yes, the strict reading of the requirements does say that you need to store the result for each time the student takes it, which also means, by the way, your list only shows the quizzes, 5 different quizzes. But if they come back and take the same quiz again, you got to store that one again, because again, one of the things it says in there is it wants to know information on the quizzes they've taken, the highest score they got and the most recent score they got. So you need at least those two. So yeah, every time they take any quiz, you need to store that quiz for that student and the score. And there might be something else you need in there that's hinted at by something I just said, but I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to give it away.
I think the short answer of that is store everything, because it says to store all the score results.
Yeah.
You only need to display what we asked you to display. If you make any other displays, they're extra.
Yep.
Have fun.
But all the results means all the scores. It doesn't mean all the individual questions. Right. That was not anywhere in there, so I didn't read it that way, so you do not need to do that. Next question. Can you please clarify the difference between requirements versus precondition in the test plan? They seem very similar. Example, book must exist in the library for checkout, can act as both a requirement and a precondition.
I'm trying to see where the word requirement is listed in the test plan. Or precondition. I don't see either of those words in here.
Well, in the test plan?
Isn't that what he asked about? What did he
Oh, it does say in the test plan. That's, yeah, the one that people asked about before was
the use cases.
The use cases, and there's no there's requirements. I think that's what he probably meant, though, was in there. But so the difference between requirements and preconditions.
Maybe I look at the use case thing.
Yeah, that's what he really meant.
Because
or she is it he she? I don't know.
I did not look at the name.
I didn't either.
And now I alt tabbed.
I've scrolled away, so I don't know. So whoever you are, either he or she, I apologize if I got your pronoun wrong.
Okay, the use case does say requirements and preconditions. Okay, so requirements says high-level description of what the use case must allow the user to do, and the preconditions says conditions that must be true before the use case is run. So similar.
So in the example you give, the precondition would be, the book must exist in the library. And you must have a library card and be allowed to, set up. The requirement is that the checkout, the checkout method must allow you to check the book out. So that's the difference. Is the requirement is what does it let you do? The precondition is what has to be true in order for you to do it.
Yeah. So you're talking about conditions are like what is true before, post conditions is what is true after, requirements is what should happen, and the scenario is like how you get there.
Right, exactly. Next question. I understand that if we gain more clarity on assignment during implementation, we can modify all 5 of the docs from D2 and later deliverables of the group project. Please confirm. We have said that several times. Again, I'm going to use the same phrase I've used before. As long as you make a good faith effort at each deliverable to make sure you fulfill that deliverable, what we will grade will be the final version that is checked in with at the end of D4. And by checked in, for those of you who are still iffy on Git, that doesn't mean you need to recheck them in. If you haven't made any changes to it, it'll still be there. But if you make changes to it and you've checked on in more changes to it, we will grade the final version. But you must have made a good faith effort at each level. So if we check out the version you submit for D2 and find that you only did half of it, the half you didn't do, you're going to get zeros on, even if it's perfect as of D4. But as long as you have a reasonable good faith effort to do that, and not just sort of throw something in there and hope it will do something, your actual grade will be based on the last version. Next question. This sub-question was skipped in re-Udacity quizzes. Actually, I'll follow up with the fact that I hope that looking at the answer and going back is okay. I try and avoid this, but in the singleton question, for example, it doesn't allow you to reverse the order of static and public, which is legal in Java, but not in the Udacity box. Also, as an aside, it's nice to see the Gamma book cited in this in this class, great classic, although the singleton is generally considered the anti-pattern people love to hate. Yes, it's okay. Obviously that's not, I mean, you should at least try the quiz first. But
I do
as
that
long
in a lot of mine simply because, like, I'll get someone some quiz question. I'm like, I don't know what format this is looking for because it's not taking anything.
exactly.
So
So we understand we're students too. Alex isn't, but he's not here. So you take our answer. Sometimes it has to happen. Hopefully you're not just always just clicking through to that and then going back and pasting in the answer, because that's
you
not
will be
really,
robbing yourself.
yeah. But we're not we don't look at it down to the level of, oh, they looked at the answer first and then pasted it in, so that's as long as you've done the quiz and you've gotten it, you'll be okay.
I ran into one last night that wanted all capitals in the class I was taking. I tried like 3 times. Like, nope. Okay.
All right. I noticed that the descriptions of some of the diagrams, by the way, you said we missed a sub question. If it was, I didn't see it in a question.
It was a follow-up to the watching things at 1.5 speed.
So this is one thing I will say, just going forward on this. A lot of when there's comments on something, a lot of times we don't necessarily go through the comments. It's if you have a question and you want to ask it, put it as a main follow-up. A comment on a follow-up oftentimes will assume that people are debating things or discussing, and if there's a lot of them, we don't necessarily read through all of them to see if there are more questions. So
yeah, we do want it shorter, but there's a lot of questions today.
Right. So just do what you did here and post it as an actual new follow-up, and then we will see it if we miss it. I noticed that the descriptions of some of the diagrams say that they may not be necessary for simple systems. If we feel our system is sufficiently simple, can we skip those diagrams as long as we provide an explanation as to why the diagram seems superfluous? In particular, if we feel we don't need a deployment diagram, would an explanation as to why we feel that way be adequate for our documentation? I would say yes, as long as your document, your reason is a valid one. I mean, if you were to say something like, we didn't do this because we didn't feel like it, and we look at it and think, yeah, your system's pretty complex, you should have that, then you might lose points. But if you can make a reasonable argument that, I don't really need, I'm trying to think of an example that wouldn't be from this, but I don't really need to put an instruction label on my bottle of pills because, you take a pill, you swallow it. It's no big deal,
instructions on most pills.
Well, you probably do need instruction on most pills, but I was just trying to think of something that wouldn't be directly out of this because otherwise everybody will go, oh, he just said this isn't needed, and we'll leave that part out. But I guess you use the deployment diagram. So if you were to say, our system doesn't really have much of a deployment. It's just a single app, and so we didn't think a diagram was necessary. That would probably be acceptable if you were to go and say, well, we couldn't really figure out what really should be here, so we just skipped it. That probably wouldn't be. Do you agree?
Yeah. Basically, if 2 sentences would communicate everything you're going to communicate in that diagram, you can put the 2 sentences. The ones that are skippable, say you can skip them for simple systems. Don't skip the class diagram or something that we told you had to be included.
Anything that doesn't specifically say that, you should not skip. For the project plan, what is expected of the project activities as per 818? We already discussed this at the beginning. I believe we've already covered that.
Person just posted it now. Did you miss the beginning, or are you still confused?
I suspect that that this person came in the middle and didn't watch the rest of it, because there's nothing here that it looks like a follow-up. It just looks like the same question. So go back and watch the beginning of the office hours. Next one. Let's say we are sticking to the same calculator app you described earlier in the office hours. If you have a use case of division, would it be correct to include other use cases such as enter numerator and enter denominator, or is that trivial information that should just be included in the sample, in the use case description of division?
It feels like it might be part of the scenario in division.
Yeah.
If there's multiple branches, if there were different things you could do with the division and you were including parentheses and this and that, you might do some sort of extends and different choices.
Yeah.
So part of that depends on how many steps are inside these steps. You don't want your scenario to have like a list of 30 subsets.
The
But,
reason we're kind of hemming and hawing on this one is because, yes, there are definitely levels of detail that are too much detail. But on the other hand, as soon as we say that, that's too much detail, somebody will go in there and then try and, have the whole calculator have one use case is be a calculator. And that, that's definitely not enough. So where to draw the line is difficult, but I would say in the example you gave, enter numerator, enter denominator, enter, the operator and hit equals or whatever would be part of the scenario for the use case of division.
I think I try to think of the bubbles in the use case diagram as being like significant decisions or things that the user wants to do. Like, they're not necessarily every field they enter, but when they're going, oh, well, now I want to do this, then that's probably a different use case, or at least an extension of that use case. And then your scenario might have kind of more the steps to accomplish that. Does that seem like a reasonable level?
So I'm guessing that Alex is not going to join us because that's our last question.
Probably not. We should give a minute or two in case that one that was a repeat question wants to ask more.
Yeah.
All right. This has been a full-length office hours.
Let's see. You don't have a shirt to show this time to kill some time?
No, I don't, because I was uploading grades after work, and work was long. Because it was.
I'm just asking Alex if he's going to show up.
Probably not at this point. Which means it was a super good day to have it actually on Wednesday and not Thursday, right?
Yeah. It was, in fact. I'm not seeing anything new here. And I'm not seeing an answer from Alex.
Okay, let's see.
Not the least of which because the question I typed, my fingers were off by one, so it didn't make any sense until I fixed it. But so the only thing we have left to do is we have to go.
That other person followed up and said they will rewatch the starting section.
Okay.
If you don't have to worry too much about joining late, it just wasn't productive for us to expand on the question if we weren't sure what you were missing from it. So follow up on Piazza if that doesn't help.
Yep. All right. So I guess that's it. The only thing we have to do is Erin and I will go back and take a look at the requirements and come up with a conclusion for the one that we said we'd come back to, and we will just type it in here. So
are we going to disagree on this right after you hit the off button?
We probably will, but then we'll come to an agreement, and then we will type the answer. So anyway, thank you everyone for being here, and have a great day and a great week, and we will see you next week. I would say same bat time, same bat channel, except that the way Alex has been doing this time, we don't really know what time it'll be next week until he tells us. But we will see you next week. So have a great week in the interim. Bye.
Bye. And our third team.